G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and that you've had a fantastic week. I have a special guest with me, the author of Provoked, Enough Already, Fool's Errand, Mr. Scott Horton. My audience, well, they love you. They get a lot out of you. Mate, I love you. This is one of the things that people don't realise, how nice of a guy you are. We met online. You took me into your family. You fed me. You sat with your family. Lovely bloke, Mr. Scott Horton. Mate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. So good to be with you. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, man. And it's always a pleasure. And thanks for doing this. I know our time zones aren't perfect between the States and Australia, but, well, the world's not perfect. And that's what I'm here to pick your brain on is, what are you seeing at the moment in Iran? What is your take on this? Because, of course, we have different narratives around why the war is happening. But what do you think is the main reason at the base of this, of why we have seen American and Israeli interest in Iran now go kinetic?
Well, I think it's all about Israel. America has no real interest in doing this. People can name side effects or sort of rationalize reasons that they might do something like this. Like, it must be all about sticking it to China or this kind of thing. But I think it's all about the Likud and, their doctrine of a greater Israel, Netanyahu's political interests in, keeping himself out of the penitentiary mostly, as has been the case. It's why he allied with Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and these other, radical, far right kooks that he had never allied with before. He needed them to form a coalition, and he would at that point do anything. This is what the libertarians call the public choice theory, which I really need to study it. I talk about it too much without having studied it enough. But I know the basic idea is that people don't become angels when they become government employees. In fact, they're still people and they still act in their own interest. And of course, if you ask them, they'll conflate their own interests with that of the country. But that's not really the case. And so it's been in his interest to do whatever he could to stay out of jail, and including fomenting wars and expanding them. And so I think also, if you look at the overall Likud doctrine of the clean break since even the late 1990s, the idea was, I'm going to get too far into the weeds. I'll try to say this part fast. The Labor Party idea under Yitzhak Rabin was, let's negotiate with Arafat and the Palestinians, give them sort of a pseudo half-assed Palestinian state. And then once we do that, then we can negotiate with the other Arab states and make friends with them. And that was sort of the promise in the Camp David Accord with Egypt, that they'll get around to that. And then, of course, that was Oslo. And they made peace with Jordan in 94, sort of based on that same theory, that this is where we're headed. But then a Netanyahu fan murdered Yitzhak Rabin in 1995. And he was replaced by his, second, his right-hand man, sort of Shimon Peres, who, certainly did not succeed in that. And then came Netanyahu. And when Netanyahu came in 96 the first time, American neoconservatives, Richard Pearl and David Wormser and Douglas Feith, they wrote this thing. It was really, Wormser was the principal author. It's called A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm. And there's a companion piece called Coping with Crumbling States, and then a book is called Tyranny's Ally. And the point is that they don't want to make peace with the Palestinians, but they do want to have at least a dominant relationship. They don't want to be, threatened by any nearby Arab states. So what they want is, as right-wingers glibly call it, peace through strength. Instead of negotiating with our neighbors in good faith and having a decent relationship, we'll just be the biggest bully on the block, so nobody dares to mess with us. And that will just be the policy going forward. And so that was what was meant by the clean break, was a clean break with Oslo, a clean break with the idea of negotiating with the Palestinians. And then the Netanyahu doctrine then was, this is what you got with Paul Wolfowitz in the famous memo about the 7 countries in 5 years. This was essentially what the Likud wanted, was for America to go after Iraq, Hezbollah, Gaddafi in Libya, the Islamists, whoever they were, in Somalia, the Islamist regime in Sudan, and then leave anyone off, and then finishing up, and Assad in Syria, and then finishing up with Iran. And these are what the neoconservative movement back in the W. Bush years called the terror masters in Tehran. They're the heart of it all. And as you've heard the slogan a million times, right? That Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. When you and I, who know a little bit about this, we go, well, actually, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the radical vanguard of the Sunni, Salafi, Wahhabi Islamists, America, Britain, and Saudi Arabia's pet terrorists, they're the greatest threat to us. They're the ones that attack the West. And regardless of the fact that America tends to back them when they're not killing us, they still kill us from time to time. And that's who has been the enemy of the West. The Shiite alliance in the region is Israel's problem. America could have allied with, or not allied, but normalized relations with Iran a long time ago, except that the Israelis insisted no, because it was counter to their strategy. They want to just destroy all these countries first, and by which they meant have us do it for them. And that's what's been going on here. So now Netanyahu let's say, go back to this point. In September of 23, the end of September 23, gave a big speech to the United Nations. He always has a visual aid, right? And he held up a map of the Middle East. And of course, Israel on there includes all of the West Bank and Gaza, right? There's no occupied territories there. It's all greater Israel already. But he's actually mocking Shimon Peres, who is trying to echo Yitzhak Rabin and say that we have to deal with the Palestinians so that we can deal with the Arabs. And he says, look, it's the new Middle East. And it has a big arrow between all of his new friends that he won with the Abraham Accords that Trump and Jared Kushner bribed in the first term to normalize relations with Israel. And he says, see, it's the new Middle East and it's the Netanyahu doctrine. I got all the Sunni kings to drop their objections to their insistence on a deal with the Palestinians and go ahead and normalize relations with us. And I'm not giving the Palestinians anything. Screw them. And he says in the speech that they've been holding peace hostage. It's all the Palestinians' fault. And what he's really explaining is you guys are screwed. Nobody's coming for you. All these Sunni kings who said that they would never normalize relations until you got a deal, they've all given in now. So you're all just going to have to lay down and die. Wah, ha, 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 was the point of his UN speech. Well, it's 2 weeks later that Hamas broke out of their pen and did the October 7th attack to re-controversialize that entire issue and prevent that from going forward, and especially prevent Saudi Arabia from signing on to those Abraham Accords, which worked. But then, of course, Hamas just gave license to Netanyahu to launch this absolutely horrific campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide in the Gaza Strip. And in doing so, really kicked off what he calls the seven-front war. And now we found out that Hezbollah was not as crippled as they said, but at least they thought they had really weakened Hezbollah. They clearly have weakened Hamas, although they've not destroyed it. They've severely set Hamas back in terms of any strength that they have. They have somewhat severely weakened Hezbollah. They killed their charismatic leader. They did the pager attack, wiping out their middle management, and they, did a ton of airstrikes against their rocket and missile reserve and whatever. So they had done some significant damage, however you mark it on percentages, I don't know, but some significant damage to Hezbollah. And then they helped Al-Qaeda overthrow the Assad regime in Damascus with the help of the Turks and the United States at the end of 2024. That was a major win for Israel, because this was, if you go back to the clean break and David Wormser's frustration, the whole problem for Israel is that Iran backs Hezbollah by way of Syria. And that was for idiotic reasons why they wanted to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and they wanted to get rid of Assad in Syria. He's the keystone in the arch of power between Tehran and Beirut, according to Wormser. So this is like the key to their prize, however you call it. Bad at idioms. Anyway, so they got rid of him. That was a huge one. And I guess, the Iraqi Shiite regime, they have harassed Americans, and their allied militias have harassed American positions, but they haven't really done anything against Israel. So they're sort of waiting on the back burner, if anything at all. And then it looked to Netanyahu like everything's coming up Likud. Now's his chance to go ahead and take out the Ayatollah if he can and try to destabilize that regime. And he has a willing, student, I guess, a supplicant in Donald Trump, where he can just say, listen, Donald, here's the deal. And and just convince him that, one, there's this threat that has to be taken care of sooner or later. Two, the other presidents, they weren't man enough, not like you, or whatever kind of flattery that he has to tell them. And three, it'll be easy. Trust me, we just got to hit them hard enough and they'll fall. Everyone's going to rise up and overthrow them because everybody hates them and just wants to be free and wants to be our friends. It's the same line of crap that they pushed in Iraq War II. People look at Iraq War II in hindsight. You got to remember, man, in 2002 and 2003, the narrative, including from Israel to the White House, was this is going to be fun. This is going to be easy. This is going to be over in a couple of weeks. Remember that mission accomplished banner? That was in April of 2000, maybe May of 2003. And what's all this about a civil war and an insurgency? And now we got to take this one guy's side against the other side and all of this stuff. That's all what happened. Yeah. That wasn't what was supposed to happen.
Well, that's my concern is this short memory conditional application of memory or history in this war. And I go, well, have you not looked back at exactly how, like this has exactly played out previously in other times? We know the playbook here. And why we stepped into it. Like I was 6 years old during that campaign. And even I, looking back, it's much easier to analyze things when they're happening when you're an adult tracking it day by day. And I'm like, this has all the same accent of the war. Like it's the same thing. How is no one seeing, or how is no one analyzing that, hey, look, it may go in a very similar direction. You have a idea of weapons of mass destruction. You have an event take place that then gives casus belli for much further, much more aggressive actions, a projection of power stance. And then you relying on an organic uprising amongst the people to overthrow. And you and I know through counterinsurgency warfare, through warfare, regime change is impossible to do by history. Now, I'm not saying it is impossible theoretically, but history does not show that you can do it from air campaign strikes alone. Doesn't show that. It also shows regime change with boots on the ground is exceptionally difficult. And you have a very bad track record of it actually occurring also with boots on the ground. And it just appears that the US has somehow fallen again for the same playbook when it had reasonable, not perfect, but the JCPOA seemed like a working document. It may have been able to be revisited. You had big players all involved in it, and it tends that it's all just been tore up, thrown out, and now we're in. And if you ask my opinion, we're in a war now that the handbrake has come off and Trump's rolling back down the hill and it's gaining momentum, and they actually don't know how to put the car back in park. I think one of the biggest things that happened with the administration is I actually think they believed their own propaganda narrative. And this is something I talk about a lot in Ukraine. Propaganda is super important. You cannot have a war in this modern day and age where you don't have a massive online propaganda campaign, because people are inquisitive. People want to look and you need, of course, support for the war. And what I've seen a lot in Ukraine is, especially like the Kursk offensive and some other pieces, there's a very interesting part in warfare, in the attritional warfare, that says propaganda must support military actions. It cannot be the other way around. So it must be militarily sound. It must be militarily.
That's a pretty standard insight, Matt. Sorry for laughing, but
no. Well, the thing is, common sense isn't that common.
No, I guess not.
So yeah, you have a military campaign and it needs to be sound militarily, and therefore we have a propaganda to support that. You can't have the propaganda itself being the leading charge of this. And I think that they actually sort of drank from the well themselves of, okay, there has been, they've gone, yep, this is what's happening. The whole country will uprise. All we need to do is, boom, take out that leader and we'll have an organic march in the street. We'll overthrow everything. And I think, well, if you're speaking to the Iranian diaspora in Australia or America, and maybe they are very happy that this has happened.
Yeah.
And what I've said is looking at a regime change, unless we're going to strap a canopy on the back of the Iranian diaspora, fly a C-17 in and airdrop them back in to overthrow the regime, then it is irrelevant how they feel about this. Like, if they're happy, I'm happy for them. If they're sad, I'm sad for them. However they feel, but it's irrelevant. If I moved to America and Australia had an uprising and I wasn't willing to come back, then my opinion on this actually isn't relevant anymore. Like, everyone, you have your right to an opinion, but it's irrelevant. And I think America stepped in, and now we are at 13 days today, and I don't think they know how to reapply the handbrake. But the question is, Scott, and I'm an Australian, so I'm from, a small, geographically incredibly important country, but we are a small population, can't really project power. When I look across, I look at the power disparity between Israel, I look at America and the great power America is, the hyperpower that America is. Why does it seem that the US is having their decisions made for them by Israel? Marco Rubio said this. Like, Marco Rubio, he had a big slip of the tongue. He had, on the second day of the war, I believe, it could have been the third, when he said, well, Israel was going anyway, so then we had to go.
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit dubious about that part of it. I mean, first of all, yes, Netanyahu absolutely browbeat Trump into doing this. Whether it came down to that sort of ultimatum where I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to drag you in, and I'm going to get your guys killed and force you into this war, I don't think so. I think they came to an agreement. Netanyahu said, come on. 1, you have to. 2, you're so handsome. And 3, come on, let's go. It'll be fun and whatever. Enough till he got Trump on board for the thing. And then, so it's a little bit of public relations on their part where they go, well, the Israelis were going to go, and they leave this out. But the implication is, we couldn't tell them no. Like, that's not true. Yes, you could too tell them no, especially Donald Trump, if he puts his foot down.
Can he? Can Donald Trump? Do you think that Trump could really say no to Netanyahu?
Look, Netanyahu may be the most arrogant SOB in the world, but comes down to it, no, Trump's the boss. He's the ruler of the world empire, and Netanyahu is just the prime minister of Israel. On the other hand, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the Israel lobby in America and Israeli, government agents in America are just absolutely relentless. They play every single card that they have to play within the rules, and they cheat. And they'll do anything to get their will. And in fact, I've oftentimes marveled, Matt, at their, what we call in economics, their high time preference, right? Where they're willing to get away with absolute murder in a way that you might advise them for public relations reasons to not use and abuse and exploit the American people so cynically, because they might grow to hate your guts and you might grow to regret that. They don't seem to consider stuff like that. Their mantra is, point. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Just go ahead and raise hell and then drag the Americans along. And I'm sure Netanyahu worked very hard, and they admit, right, that Lindsey Graham went over there to help him game out how you got to talk to Trump. Here's how to help manipulate Trump. And they helped each other with, what do you tell him? Lindsey Graham told the Wall Street Journal that he was telling Trump he was trying to compare him to Franklin Roosevelt, America's great leader of World War II. He said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Don't you want to be like that? Don't you want to be big and strong and whatever? This is the kind of crap that they told him to get him on board for the thing. And then on top of that, you have the entire Congress is locked up, or not entire, but damn near. The media is locked up. Fox News is completely, under the control of the Murdochs, the, Israel lobby, whoever it is that writes their shtick, has, carte blanche to control the narrative there. And so, you could see Donald Trump. Well, and look, on top of that, all the think tanks, the completely incestuous relationship between the neoconservative movement and all of the kind of forest of think tanks that are tied on one hand to the Likud and on the other hand to the arms industry. I mean, that is vast power, and it's pretty hard to track.
Well, that's my point, though. Like, can you really say no to this? Like, I know that I know, theoretically you can, but in the American institution of power, where you've got the Congress, you've got these lobby groups, you have false flag events that have and potentially could take place. You have the files with the PH coming from an island that looks to be an intelligence operation. This is my question is, Really, can he say no, or does it appear that the US leadership is compromised? Because if I take I like the saying, a view from 50,000 feet, so floating and looking down upon it. When I look down upon it, I go, yeah, it doesn't seem like you are ever willing to say no. 12-day war was the same. This war was the same. And even then, when America is saying, oh, well, we didn't think Israel was going to go so hard on striking oil facilities or energy facilities, then I go, every single weapon system that Israel is able to fire and every plane up in the air, you could ground instantly if you wanted to. If America said, look, we don't like that, so the F-35I, you're just not getting these parts until you do that, it wouldn't get off the ground. You could have the power, and it just doesn't seem like anyone's actually ever willing to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on one hand, it could just be as simple as blackmail and that kind of thing. Lots of blackmail and bribery and just people, Glenn Greenwald played audio, surreptitiously recorded audio of one of the leaders of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee talking about how he just completely owns Marco Rubio, and as well Michael Waltz, which you might remember, he was the original national security advisor for Trump, and he actually got run out of there because he was exposed for blatantly working with the Israelis to box Trump in on Iran. And it was too far, and they got rid of him. But then they replaced him with Rubio. And so Rubio was Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and same damn difference. On the blackmail of Trump, on one hand, is this a guy who would cheat on his wife? Absolutely, right? Whether they have him committing crimes against kids, I think is really doubtful. I think if they had anything really bad on him, the CIA would have already used it against him back when, the FBI, his enemies in the FBI would have made sure that was easy to unredact with, your word processor or whatever, that would be in there. I think it's probably not that, but it is, that is his circle of friends, his network of power was, the Epstein class, as they call them, no question about that. The Clintons and all that's, who he ran around with for many years. But then, look, I used to have a bumper sticker. I used to sell a bumper sticker that said, the National Security Agency blackmailing your congressman since 1952. But so you could apply that to Israel, because remember the great Glenn Greenwald story from 2013. The NSA turns over everything they have to Israel every day. And what do they have? They have everything. The NSA vacuums up the whole internet every day, and they turn it all over, including us. Everything they turn over to the Israelis. And so is it hard for an Israeli to tap a congressman on the shoulder and be like, yeah, we know everything about your girlfriend and whatever? Yes. You don't have to invite them to Epstein's den or whatever. Do the slightest surveillance on these people, tap their phone, log their keystrokes, and you got their ass. And the Israelis, of course, can do that. So, and again, man, it's easy to say this is against America's national interest. There's no way in the world you could convince these people that this is good for America to do. Well, yeah, no, exactly. But it's good for them. And for whatever myriad reasons, it can be good for a politician to go along with the Israelis again, or this time, because of the thing they want, the thing that they're willing to do for you, the thing they're willing to do against you. And then you got to, you know what I mean? You have to zoom in on each circumstance of each federal cop, each, executive on the 7th floor, each federal judge, each congressman and senator. They all have their different incentives. And, one of the ways this works, by the way, this didn't ever get anywhere near enough coverage, is there's a fantastic 2-part documentary at Al Jazeera called The Lobby. And the first part is about the United Kingdom, and the second part is about the United States. And in both cases, it's about the Israel lobby and their manipulation of the governments here. And here's what they do, man. They send young anti-Zionist Jews undercover into the Israel lobby. And they get hardcore, really deep cover investigative journalism, like the kind you hadn't seen since the 80s or whatever, where they literally sent these guys to infiltrate for months with secret cameras, recording how they do their business and all of that. And they play very dirty pool, right? They're willing to spread any rumor, willing to smear anyone, willing to sue anyone, use lawfare, use control of various newspapers and whatever. Like you saw the way they got Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of Labour in the UK. He was anti-Zionist. He had to go, and they manufactured whatever crisis they needed to around him to get him to go. And it just also portrays the vast influence that they have in the United States.
Huge,
and what's funny about this actually is, and it ain't coming to a head yet. It's going to be a while still, Matt. Is it's coming to a head more and more in the Democratic Party, where you just have the voting population of the Democratic Party versus the owners and rulers of the party. And more that's the same on the right, where, it depends on the day and how you ask the question and all that. But certainly younger people are skewing harder and harder against Israel. And sooner than later, probably, especially after this war, you're going to really see a growing consensus among the population of the country who are really just turned against Israel, with, baby boomers, half of them excluded maybe. But then the owners and controllers of both political parties being completely locked in with Israel and their goals in defiance of the American people and sort of super majority growing consensus here. And that's going to be a real crack up, that, as Pat Buchanan joked about Washington, D.C. being Israeli occupied territory. How about the whole country, where it's an apartheid state, where the Israel lobby really controls the United States and rules the rest of us? Like, we're Palestinians. At some point, like, it's got to give. And I think the Israelis essentially are too arrogant, and they're very short-sighted in the way that they intervene in American politics to get their way. And I have to admit, it's worked out for them for a long time in a lot of ways, or at least they got what they wanted. Whether it's really good for them or not may be arguable, like the case of Iraq War II. But they certainly have been successful in manipulating America's political process. But that may be coming to an end. In fact, I'll finally shut up after I say that. You may have noticed, as fake as this is, but still, it's a weather vane, a windsock or something, that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, came out and said Israel is an apartheid state and damn them for the war in Iran, and et cetera, whatever he said. I forgot who joked. Was it Tucker Carlson that joked that he probably called the ADL to like warn them and get permission first before he said it?
After Gavin pretended that he didn't know what AIPAC was, he's like, "Oh, AIPAC, it's funny you bring that up. I haven't heard."
That was like 6 months ago.
yeah, that was hilarious. But I think, and there's a bit of concern in this as well for Jewish people, is I actually think Israel has massively overplayed its hand into the US. And of course, you've got a lot of people who are just average people who are Jewish, who of course get caught up in this.
And terrorist attack today, Matt, at a synagogue in Michigan.
Right. Okay. I've only just woken up in Australia. It's still the morning.
Let me tell you the bad news, pal. I'll tell you. So first of all, a guy with a Muslim name shot some people at a school in Virginia this morning, and I know he killed at least one and wounded more until some students tackled him and beat him up, and that's all I know about that one. And then in Michigan, a guy crashed a truck into a Temple Israel synagogue, it was called. It crashed it in, and they say fired some shots, although he did not kill anyone, and I don't think he even wounded anyone as far as I know. But then the cops killed him. But then get this, man. Ryan Grimm was reporting, and I just saw this right before I went on with you. Ryan Grimm was reporting on Twitter that the Israelis killed this guy's children last night in Lebanon. The guy that attacked the completely, innocent civilians. And I mean, people on Twitter saying, well, this synagogue supports Israel through donations or whatever. No, I'm sorry. This is not a target. This is not a legitimate target by any means whatsoever. These are innocent civilians, women and children, people who have every right to go about their business there. And they should stop donating to the IDF. But anyway, that has nothing to do with whether it's okay to try to kill them or not. It's completely ridiculous. But that's what's going to happen. Absolutely. It is blowback terrorism.
And I will say that we're seeing this huge. I said recently that the only supporters of Israel in America are dying out. No new ones are being born. So it's only
Yeah, that's
the
a good way
boomer
to put
era.
it.
So every year when however many people die who identify as right wing, they're gone. No one who's turning voting age, like no one. It might be 5%, but left, right, however, they are not in support of Israel. On the left, they are more of your pro-Palestine. On the right, they're more pro-America First movement. And I will say, I don't think American politics has caught up yet to see that that's happening. But I do believe that Israel has actually seen that, hey, look, our support in America is dying out quickly. Go look at every young person's Instagram algorithm and tell me how that looks in relation to Israel. And this is why I think Israel's building these relations with India. India is an incredibly powerful country, will become a way more powerful country, even through India has a hidden weapon of mass control and potential destruction if they want. The Indian weapon that could be used, and it's a very passive, is diaspora. If you have a population of 1.47, I think, billion people, the ability to influence democratic countries due to your diaspora in voting pools in a country like Australia or in many is unbelievable. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of Israeli politicians. We look at Netanyahu with Modi, where, right, we see our support is rapidly declining in the US. Okay, we need to swing to what is going to become a superpower that can control us, because we are never going to have the population or the resource or the capacity to be a great power, but we can be by proxy great power. And the American people, a lot of Westerners, they are really changing their tone like massively towards Israel. And of course, like we have seen with that horrible shooting, that people changing their whole opinion towards Jews in general. And I think that there's been a large overstep campaign, and everything's always go way too far before the pendulum swings back. We're in a very, very scary time. But there's also a failure to just recognize maybe core roots of things as well. So any criticism is just anti-Semitic. So if you criticize anything, I'm sure that I and everyone will be classified just as anti-Semitic. To the point now, it's actually lost any meaning of the word. And that Israel they exploit the ambiguity of being a Jewish state to shield themselves from any I guess, what was I looking for? Any Western discourse. So, you can't criticize a state because then you are instantly anti-Semitic. You shield yourself in that. It was very interesting. And where I'm going on this is this JPPI, the Jewish People Policy Institute, released a study called Chinese and Anti-Semitism. And I really implore people, please go and read this. And please, Scott, you'll get a bit of a kick out of it. It says in basically the beginning that anti-Semitism is rising in China, and the party is being pushed by the Communist Party of China. They're the ones pushing it. The people are pushing it. Algorithms are pushing it. And their primary sort of hypothesis is they're pushing this to create the illusion that the US is controlled by Israel and a select amount of Jewish people. And when I was reading this, I'm like, yeah, but this also isn't an illusion. Like if people in China are going, hey, yeah, the US, it appears that you are complicit in a genocide of supporting weapons. You won't apply international laws, customs, and international norms upon this. But this isn't some party-run propaganda campaign. I'm not saying the party don't push this. I don't see what really benefit it would have for Xi's party to push that. But it's very funny to see that they're like, no. It's not our actions that have caused any of this in China to go, it looks like the US is being controlled by another state. That no, it's a propaganda campaign run from the MSS instead.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, as you said, it's the gray in a very cynical way. This is their benefit of calling themselves the Jewish state, and then getting to hide behind that, and getting to hide behind all criticism as an attack on their ethnicity or religion or history or heritage or whatever, rather than actual things they're doing. And when Israeli, dual citizens and or American Zionists, especially extremely wealthy ones, exert an extraordinary amount of influence. They'll on one hand brag and boast about it, right? You can watch APAC commercials where they talk about how vast their influence is in the United States of America, or read the Jewish Daily Forward about all of that stuff that happened. That was us that did that, or whatever. I mean, whatever, the way that they phrase it. But if anyone critical says the exact same thing, like, hey, this is irresponsible power by unaccountable people doing terrible things, what the hell? Then they go, oh yeah, of course, the classic anti-Semitic trope. It's like, well, geez, so like nobody can ever criticize anyone who's Jewish for anything. That doesn't really seem fair. You know what I mean? But it's true that there are classic anti-Semitic tropes like that. And there are various kernels of truth to those tropes, depending on where they come from, in which time, in which place. And it's still always wrong to hold people who didn't do anything responsible for things that other people did. None of that ever changes. You know what I mean? But it is true that most people in the world are some kind of commie, right? Like, you got to be a really good libertarian to be individualist enough to just not hold people responsible for other people's actions. Hold them responsible for their actions, and do not hold them responsible for other people's actions, or even, collectively guilty in your own mind even. Otherwise, you know how people are. It's the Indians and the Australians and the Palestinians, and depending on the time and place, the Jews. That's how people talk. English, especially, is a very communist language. It's full of we and our and us and they and all these things that may or may not be appropriate in any given sentence, but would sound weird if you try to be too much of a grammar Nazi and not use them. You know what I mean? But like, it is the height of unfairness for the barbarian Israeli regime to go around calling themselves Judaism and unfairly implicating people who have absolutely nothing to do and no authority whatsoever, no power and influence whatsoever to decide these issues, and implicating them in their crimes. It's extremely dangerous. And then, of course, they just hide whenever. I mean, man, I saw what Eric Adams, the former. I'm not picking on just Jewish people or whatever. It's just the people who bought into this consensus. Eric Adams, the former mayor of New York City, tweeted out in response to this terrorist attack today that anti-Semitism is so bad and we just have to educate people against anti-Semitism. And it's like, come on, man, this is blowback from the war. You can't just pretend that this is about this guy. And especially now we know that Israel killed this guy's kids yesterday. Don't tell me that Muhammad made him do it. Okay. I'm not stupid. But the thing is Eric Adams, okay, maybe he is a bit stupid. He anticipates that nobody else is any smarter than he is or something like that. But I'm sorry, I can see right through him. And so can anybody else, that this happened not before the war, but because of the war. The same as the guy who killed people drinking at the bar in Austin, Texas on the Saturday, 2 weeks ago when they started the war. They bombed a school and killed a bunch of girls in the morning. And some guy from Senegal grabbed an AR-15 and went to a bar in downtown Austin, Texas, in my hometown, and killed 3 people and wounded 15 more. Immediate blowback terrorism. Again, there was a shooting at a school in Virginia today. There was an attack on a Jewish synagogue in Norway, and I'm losing track already. I better start a new, ongoing Twitter thread of the blowback terrorism attacks that we have coming directly because of this aggressive war, this completely unnecessary war, a surprise attack against a country that we're in the middle of negotiating with based on false pretenses and in the interest of a foreign power that we don't even have a treaty of alliance with. You know what I mean? And they're not even faithful friends. We could call Australia faithful friends at least. The Israelis would just as soon, sink our battleship. They don't give a damn about us.
Well, it's a bit, as an Aussie, and I actually believe that Australia and America are the closest aligned countries. I see that Aussies and Americans are incredibly close people, and you look through wars about when the Australian Infantry, when I was part of, fight with the Marines in every battle since every campaign since we begun. And it always is a little bit, to me, when it's like, oh, this is our greatest ally, I'm like, compared to like us, like what we do, we have huge amounts of your weapons in our country. We have huge amounts of trade with you. We fight with you in everything. Many of our boys have laid down their lives for you in all these different campaigns everywhere. It seems a bit rich that we're not much further up that list, guys. And that's why we're seeing support for the current administration, support for even America maintaining its dominance at the top of the food chain in the world is slipping very quickly, and people are looking for another route because they go, it's hard to work with this country anymore because America operates as a bully. It doesn't operate within the international laws or customs or rules or anything other than working as a bully. And I think a lot of states are starting to go, yeah, we're sick of that. And I say this is why I think the century belongs to Asia, is we're seeing them, actually, it's very funny, you're seeing Asia try to implement more of this rules-based order, globalization, and trade within. We're actually seeing more of that now in Asia than we're starting to see the West. The West is completely subjective. It's completely conditional on when we apply the rules and when we don't. And when Russia move on Ukraine, it's an invasion, it's an occupation, it's a bloodthirsty imperialist movement through. When we see actions done by the US or by Israel, it's a border crossing, it's a skirmish, it's the language has all changed. I'm sure you've seen that meme where it's got like a Ukrainian flag and a bomb, and it's like good bomb, Russian flag, bad bomb, American flag, freedom bomb, Israeli flag, what bomb? Like, and it's like that. And this is the conditional application and the hierarchy of human suffering, that there is a legitimate hierarchy of, what shade of brown are you? Yeah, we don't really care how many of you die. It really disgusts me about when we look at the actual cost of these campaigns of human lives. And I'm not Muslim, I'm not Jewish, I'm not this, I'm not that, but God, look, we are massacring people here. And what are we doing that actually makes this better for us? What makes it better for Iranians? And I think the Iranian regime is a radical regime that I wish would not exist and would be overthrown by their people and not have a free country. Yeah. But I fear is I don't think the US or Israel want them to be a successful country. I talking to some of my friends, I go, what they want is they want a mowing the lawn campaign, because what they don't want is if a new regime came to power that really pulled the state together, at the end of the day, that is a state with 93 million people and a huge country that would then threaten Israel's hegemony and Israel's goals in the region, because it's still going to be a majority Shia Muslim state. And if they had a government that was really highly efficient, effective, and that we couldn't find a way, we would find a way, but to put sanctions on, it would threaten them. So no, this campaign is not to free the Iranians and install a really efficient, effective, friendly regime. No. We want to just continue the country in chaos because, well, if you have a country in chaos, they're never going to be able to come together to build something that can project power. And therefore, your relative power in the region increases.
Yep. I think that's the name of the game. I just interviewed this guy who he had me on his show a few times. I noticed that he has really good questions. And so he's an Israeli and then has like a PhD or something in Israeli military history and all this stuff. And, was an officer of some kind in their military. And now he's really, I think, only since the genocide in Gaza turned against Israel. And he's very much against the current war. And I just interviewed him. He's been writing these great tweets about, you may have seen them, about, Glenn Greenwald was retweeting some of his stuff. He had these great tweets about what he's being told by people in the IDF and what he's being told by people in Israel, in northern Israel, and facing Hezbollah rockets and all these different kinds of things. And I interviewed him, and he talked about the three major kind of pillars of Israeli policy pushing this here. Is the way he defined it was, first is Netanyahu wants to extend the war as long as possible, here, there, and everywhere, against Hezbollah, against Iran, against the Houthis, wherever, against the helpless Gazans and Palestinians of the West Bank as well. As long as he can keep everything hot so that he doesn't have to go to the penitentiary. That is his primary objective, is, extending his term in power and his own megalomania. I actually, just right before going on with you, I actually just saw a tweet today where he was declaring Israel is now a global superpower and has this massive, devilish grin on his face about just how much has been achieved here by them and all of that. So there's, plenty of his own hubris there. And then this guy said that the second thing is the Israeli defense establishment. And they have this sort of uneasy alliance with the civilian government, as they always do, right? But their policy is to break these states into smaller pieces, to have warring tribes, or at least much smaller little statelets of, endlessly powerless people who will never be able to pose any kind of threat. Go ahead and just wreck them. And then, of course, are the religious zealots who want to blow up the mosque and rebuild the temple and force the Messiah to come and blow up the world and whatever crazy thing. And how they, the settler movement and all that, they play a huge role in this coalition and pushing all of this policy as well. And of course, Netanyahu's policy of extending the war and the military establishment's policy of wrecking everything, they somewhat coincide and overlap, although with Netanyahu, evidently the emphasis is on extending the thing, whereas maybe the military could take or leave that and would prefer maybe a shorter war, but to go ahead and break as much as they can. I think it's pretty clear. There's been a lot in the major papers about this stuff where, like, the Israelis told the Financial Times they just want to destroy the place. They want to see a civil war. They don't think anyone can take over. They just want to see Iran wrecked, basically.
I actually, just to pause you there. Sorry, Scott, but I actually have that direct quote in front of me.
Go ahead,
because
please.
I think that actually, because I've got it written on a note card on my office, because I think that is the best. That was from Danny Citrinovitz, I think his name is Citrinovitz. I've actually reached out to him for comment and an interview actually as well, from the Tel Aviv Institute of Strategic Studies, because I think this sums up perfectly Israel's goal here, that this isn't that we're going to implement a new regime and it's going to be free Iran. No. It's mowing the lawn. Quote, if we can have a coup, great. If we can have people on the streets, great. If we can have a civil war, great. Israel couldn't care less about the future or the stability of Iran. And I would actually go a step further and say, you don't want stability. You want it to be chaos. The best outcome for you would be that it remains in a civil war. It doesn't matter that 93 million people would be, in a bloody massacre and couldn't eat or couldn't drink. No, because they can never get on their feet. And we don't care about the stability. What you do actually care about is you care about having instability. If I saw that New Zealand off Australia was my enemy, if I saw that, I would go, attacking it's very costly. It's mountainous. Let's just mow the lawn of the government. Let's create chaos in the region. And then our relative power does this.
Yep. They openly admitted that that's their goal, is just to wreck the place. Remember Syria? That was to a great degree at Israeli behest, Obama's dirty war there. And of course included the Saudis and the Qataris and the Turks and others. But the goal essentially, again, was focusing on Israel's Shiite enemies, never even mind America's bin Ladenite enemies. And in fact, even if the war is directly on their behalf, screw it, because Israel hates Hezbollah, and that's what counts to them. And so they knew, maybe they lied to themselves for a little while. Okay, fine, give them that. But they knew very quickly that the insurgency in Syria was dominated by al-Qaeda in Iraq, who had just come over the line from the last war. And they knew that. And Victoria Nuland herself even said in the end of 2012 that Jabhat al-Nusra, she was the spokeswoman for the State Department. She said Jabhat al-Nusra is just an alias for al-Qaeda. They knew exactly what they were doing. Hillary Clinton, when asked, why aren't we doing more, said, well, Ayman al-Zawahiri has endorsed the revolution in Syria. Are we backing al-Qaeda in Syria? And that was in the beginning of 2012, actually, when she said that. So they knew what they were doing, and then they just did it anyway. And they got something like 500,000 people killed. It completely destroyed Syria as a nation state. They ended up creating the caliphate, which was, this guy Baghdadi was nothing but bin Laden or Zarqawi Jr. up there, declaring himself the Caliph Ibrahim, the divinely ordained ruler of all of Islam or whatever, and created a state the size of Great Britain in eastern Syria and western Iraq and ruled it for 4 years. And this was all, direct consequence of Obama wantonly destroying Syria. And to a great degree, and I have in my book enough already, I have a giant whole section called Israel's role, where I focus on their part in all of this. And it just goes to show, I mean, it's too simple, but it is real. That it is just simply as simple as Israel hates the Shiites. Never mind the bin Ladenites. Israel hates Iran. Israel hates Hezbollah. And the Alawite regime in Syria is basically, close to the Shiites and is allied with Iran and Hezbollah. And so that's the only thing that matters. And even after America declared war against the Islamic State, the Israelis still insisted that, no, stop. We like the Islamic State. We prefer the Islamic State to Assad. We don't want you to get rid of them. Even Thomas Friedman wrote about that in the New York Times. We're using the Islamic State to tax the Shiites and all this. They didn't care how many civilians got suicide bombed or their heads cut off by these absolute maniacs. They didn't give a damn that they destroyed, man. And in the aftermath of Iraq War II, they went and did this to Syria. It would be like if Saddam Hussein had been in the middle of putting down a bin Ladenite insurgency, and then W. Bush went ahead and invaded anyway and overthrew him on their behalf. That's what they did to Syria. And, the Israeli strategist told the New York Times front page, we don't want either side to lose or to win, right? We don't want peace. We don't want them to stop. We want both sides to continue to hemorrhage to death. That's the strategic thinking here. Hemorrhage, as in, like, if you cut your leg artery wide open and we're bleeding to death, right? You don't just call bleeding hemorrhaging. Hemorrhaging is when it could kill you. That's how bad you're bleeding, right? And let everyone there just bleed to death. And there's no morality in it whatsoever. As the Israelis say about the Palestinians, they say, we exist on a higher moral plane. Yeah, in other words, everybody but them is just a chicken and they can just do whatever they want with us, right? They're the human beings and nobody else is. And that's the way they look at it. And it ain't going to end well. It's not working well so far. I don't know why it would end well.
Well, you see a hell of a lot of this. And I think what you said about then wanting to hemorrhage against each other, that goes exactly into what this strategist said about Iran. That we don't care. We just want unrest. Yeah. And this idea of a hierarchy of people, which I think is disgusting. But this actually goes back into a very old Chinese idea of gaining power. I believe in Chinese, someone's going to pull me up and be like, it's shocking, but I think it is yi yi zhi yi of let barbarians fight barbarians. Let these people over here fight these people over here. You can fund both sides of it if you want. You can stay out of it. Let them fight each other. And all that does is wear themselves down and increases your relative power. And that is when people go, why isn't China moving on Taiwan? I go, because I think they're sitting in the halls in Beijing going, let the barbarians fight barbarians. Let America weaken their global position with these wars in the Middle East. Let America wear down their trust, their credibility at home. Let Russia wear down their weapons in Europe. Let the Europeans wear down their weapons in Ukraine. Let that all happen. And our position, we go to the Munich Security Conference and we speak like the only adults in the room. And then we put our hand up and go, hey, we will mediate an end to this war. We will enforce an order and a peace and a this. And you're letting the barbarians fight barbarians. And you speak about this idea of sort of uncivilized and civilized world. And Zelensky made comment on this yesterday, that the entire civilized world has sanctioned Russia. Speaking about, of course, people wanting to lift sanctions on Russian oil because of, well, the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed, and that is causing worldwide economic issues currently and could be an economic crisis. And what I pushed on was, well, what does that mean? What do you mean by this? that the whole civilized world, and it should be known that, of course, Zelensky and a lot of his party are Jewish. People have fled who have been caught in embezzlement of money in Zelensky's friends, and they fled Timur Mindich to Tel Aviv. What do you mean the civilized world? And then I looked up, did a bit of research. Well, 85% of the world by population didn't sanction Russia. So are they uncivilized? Like, if the civilized world did, is everyone else uncivilized? And does that mean that they are just, barbaric people with swing a girl over their shoulder and knock someone on the head? Like, what does that mean? Are they then uncivilized?
The international community is America, Britain, France, and Germany.
Yeah. Well, and this, I think it might be in your book Provoked, where you talk about the West and the rest. Maybe I'm misquoting you and someone else. And that this is a very dangerous path to go down in a coming multipolar, multinodal world. Is if you step in with this idea of the West and the rest, you're going to very, very quickly figure out the power changes that have taken place very quietly behind the scenes. And as Mr. Jeffrey Sachs said recently, is America in this century, they are going to figure out and find out the hard way that they are only 4% of the global population. And I do get concerned when we do see this dehumanization of whole groups of people, collective punishment of people. And I tell you, when I see that Israel or Zionists push collective punishment of people, I go, you must have a very, very short memory of what collective punishment, what dehumanization, what systemization, and what legalization. That's an idea of Zygmunt Bauman, a fantastic sociologist from Poland. You must have a very short memory of what outcome does that have, because we saw this in the camps in the Second World War. That's what leads to atrocities like that occurring. Yet the people that were the victims of it tend now to be willing to collectively punish whole groups, to dehumanize, to make it systemic. It's a real concern.
Yeah. Look, I think it's the kind of thing where so many people have warned for so long about how this was likely to go, how difficult it would be to define a win in a reasonable way and get it. All morality aside, but like, what are you trying to achieve here? It's just not going to work. There's just too much at risk. A few hours before the war started, Larry Johnson was on the show saying, one, there's a 90% chance that we're going and we're doing this. And two, it's going to be a disaster. They're going to reach out and touch all our bases in the region. They're going to close the Straits of Hormuz. We're going to be locked into escalation in this thing, in a war that we can't really win in any reasonable way. I mean, that's him right before the war, and 100 other guests on my show, maybe 1,000 other guests on my show going back over the years, warning the same thing. And they have, really just through simpletonism and hubris have decided to go ahead and bite this off. I can almost just picture Trump like plugging his nose and jumping into off that high dive or something, right? Like, just go for it, dude. We'll figure it out. We'll see what happens. But you got to take the plunge. You got to make the step and do the thing. And don't worry. What's the worst that could happen? You know what I mean? And like, just went ahead and really like maybe didn't look and notice that pool's empty and break your neck.
Where does this go, Scott? Because I have real concern. That this can't be achieved conventionally, militarily, of what they're looking for. And I also don't believe that Trump and Netanyahu are the type of characters who will then walk away from this. I think the best outcome is Trump gaslights himself, declares victory, believes, like to George Costanza. It's not a lie if you believe it, Jerry. He gaslights himself to the degree of, yep, I have won, and then we have declared victory, banner on the ship, pop the champagne, move out.
Then at that point, will the Iranians stop?
But that's the problem. They're not going to stop. Why would they? Like if I was a commander, they would go, no, we're not letting you stop. And this is my concern: is where does this end? Because does it end with, and people think I'm crazy saying this, I could see a future where we are dropping nuclear weapons on Iran.
Dude, look, Trump is an emotional guy. I was saying before this war that the Ayatollah has been very cautious. And part of that is because he knows that Donald Trump is loco, right? Like this guy, if for example, he didn't just hit radars, but wiped out our guys in their barracks in Kuwait or something, killed 5,000 guys or some crazy thing, or they sank a ship full of sailors out there on the Indian Ocean. What might Trump do in his upset? And if you're the way I was framing it, if you're the last Ayatollah, Khamenei, the father here, then you do have to weigh the risk of just how hard you're willing to fight back against America. You got to bloody this nose somehow, but you got to be really careful that you don't make Trump just break out nuclear weapons, because in fact, his word is law. He could launch an atomic strike, a thermonuclear strike on any city on this planet in a moment's notice. And there's no one in the world who has the authority to tell him no. And they will do it. And he could do that just if he was mad. And especially if he, felt like he was being made to look like a fool or a loser or something like that, he could. Now, at the same time, I would like at least to differ with you that I agree with you about Netanyahu, but I think that Trump very easily could walk away. I was kind of joking around on the Twitter there that it's very good that words don't mean anything. And he can demand unconditional surrender one day and then just totally forget about it the next, right? But it's also a problem that words don't mean anything, because here he is at the podium declaring victory and saying we already won. Yeah. But he can continue to bomb for an indefinite period after that anyway, still. So with Donald Trump, it's just he's so willing to say so many contradictory things about everything that essentially all of it is meaningless. You just have to wait and watch and see what he actually does. I think he has set himself up for that declaration of victory numerous times by saying, look, we totally eroded their missile stores and their launchers and their drones and their Navy. We put so many of their ships at the bottom of the sea and all of this kind of stuff where, a lot of bluster like that can cover for a lot of failure if he's willing to do that. I mean, I don't know exactly how much credibility to put into this because it's all very self-serving, of course. But the Wall Street Journal, for one, and there's numerous other reports, but the Journal has it, in today, I guess your yesterday's paper, that Trump wants to wrap this up and Israel doesn't. And there's a real divergence between their goals and ours on this. And I think that that's probably right, that Trump never thought the war was supposed to last for some kind of indefinite period, because I don't think he thinks he could ever call that a victory. He has to know that for it to be a victory, it's got to look and feel short and sweet to the American people. And he's already failed in achieving his great uprising and all that crap like he'd been promised. But again, he could just flip-flop around. He could just say anything. He can change his mind about anything. And he's already said, well, I don't even care if they keep a theocratic Shiite government there, as long as they're nice. For Christ's sake, he could just call the whole thing off right now. Again, the Ayatollahs and the new regime, they might have cause to say, oh yeah, no way. Now that you're out of interceptors, you want to quit and call timeout? No way, pal. And they could go, double or triple or what. They've demonstrated they have hypersonics. They have not demonstrated how many they have. But there's a whole other, in fact, right before we went on, despite all the propaganda, Reuters has a story. I don't know if it's true or not, or maybe it was Bloomberg News, says they still have at least half their launchers. We've been told that, well, they still may have half their missiles, but we got rid of most of their launchers, though. Well, apparently that's not true either. We're very quickly running out of interceptors, and they are, very quickly not running out of interceptors here. So I think it's continue to be a real problem. And they may think that since it's gone this far and old Ayatollah is dead, his more reserved and conservative response is obsolete now and did not work in staving off Trump through gentlemanly, politeness, bombing empty corners of bases to save face in the past. And they may decide that, no, we're going to go ahead and use them or lose them, man. We're going to go ahead and fire 85% of what we got before we stop and hope you don't like it. You know what I mean? They could continue to wreak havoc on these bases and on particularly all the radar systems that are there to prevent them from doing worse. And, I don't really like speculating about the near term and whatever, but it does make sense to me that they would be slowly and steadily working on these radar stations as best they can in preparation for something much worse. And that they may have something, really bad in store for Israel, probably more than American bases. I think they're more likely to focus on Israel, but
well, that's my concern. My concern is that there has been more support given to Iran than we've seen. And because if I was you have to put your hat on, regardless of if you support their country or not, you have to put your hat on and go, like your strategy hat on and go, what would I do? If I was sitting there, what would I do? And I'd go, well, for the first couple of weeks, I would fire off anything that I'm willing to get intercepted in the air. So I'm firing off all these missiles, anything, because the Iron Dome is a fantastic system. The Patriots are good. The THAADs are good. We know multiple THAADs have been lost. We know there was an international shortage of Patriot interceptors. We just know that. There has been for years because of Ukraine, the 12-day war, and now this conflict. Of course, there's a shortage. So let's just fire that off. And if China's given us a hypersonic missile, or we have all these ones left, it's at the 2-3 week mark that we start hammering these bases now that their interceptors are far lower. That's what really concerns me, is the ability for other systems to pop out. We do not know what China or Russia delivered to Iran, and it could deliver a huge blow to our forces. The Western forces in the region. I'm not saying that they're going to win with it, but what happens if a ship goes down? And this is I know that Pete Hegseth, he spoke that, we will have the Navy escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. If we start seeing Navy ships at the current time take other ships through the Strait of Hormuz, you will see a Navy ship go down. Unless there is severe degradation beyond what we have seen, that is incredibly dangerous. And you can bluster about, there's got no Navy. You know who doesn't have a Navy? Ukraine. Ukraine scuttled their ships on the opening days of the war. Which country has taken down a number of Russian ships in the Black Sea? Ukraine. Though we've seen the absolute devastation that cheap drone boats made out of jet ski parts with a shaped charge on the front can bloody make. And the Black Sea is a hell of a lot bigger than a 30-kilometre wide strait with a 3K shipping lane in it that you want to escort ships through. Strap in if you're moving ships through there. But if you don't get them moving, we're going to have a lot of problems on the international markets.
Yeah. Listen, man, I was told this morning by a guy who was in the wars and knows people in the military officers and said they're getting ready to go. Now, I don't know whether the plan is to hit Isfahan or to take the Straits of Hormuz. Both of those have been rumored even in the major papers. But apparently they're planning to drop in something like special forces to do a big mission, something like perhaps the 82nd Airborne to secure the perimeter, and then with whatever air power or whatever. And the way I heard it was the officers telling my friend this were telling him it was the worst idea in the entire world that they could possibly think of, and that they were preparing to be killed in it. That they thought that this was just absolutely harebrained procedure going on there, and that they were soon to be deployed on what amounted to something like a suicide mission over there, something that they did not think would work anyway. So I don't know the truth of that. I'm not telling you that I predict that that's what they're going to do or whatever. I'm just telling you, I heard that from a guy who knows people at the Pentagon today. And there's been major reporting about this in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and other places where they're talking about the potential of sending troops to Hormuz or to Isfahan, either, to secure the straits or to secure that nuclear material. Nobody's talking about trying to sack Tehran or anything like that, but it's pretty easy for me to imagine. I'm sure for you, as a former soldier in Afghanistan and everything, I can picture like the Hollywood movie of dropping in SOCOM guys to secure the nuclear stuff. The 82nd Airborne kind of trying to stand around and create a perimeter, and then A-10 Warthogs to fend off the rampaging hordes of Persians coming to kill them all. And how long can they hold out before the end of the movie in an hour and a half? I don't know, but it doesn't sound very good, dude.
Well,
Um,
I remember back in the 12-Day War, I spoke with some both former and current members of the Special Forces community to, hey, what is the reality of an operation against facilities like this? And they said, oh, yeah, it's doable one way, but you're not getting out. The people massively overestimate the weight of equipment you can actually take into a state by air. Like, you are either dropping it under canopy or you bring it in by helicopter. There's not that much. Like, you're not dropping in that much equipment. It is incredibly limited. And how are you getting then back out? Like, you can drop in under canopy. How are you getting out again? Like you're walking out. You're dropping in Humvees. You're dropping in light armored vehicles. It's a very difficult operation. And speaking to my guys, they're like, look, okay, what happens? You enter Fordo, you enter Natanz, you want to secure this nuclear material, right? You come up against an area that has been hit by a missile that has 50 meters or 150 feet of backfill because a missile's collapsed the dirt on top of it. What do we do? What, are you going to airdrop in bulldozers and excavators that's going to take a month to excavate? Or, okay, we enter the facility and we enter a corridor that has a 150-ton door on it to protect the facility. What do we do then? Or we enter and there's a machine gun nest down a corridor. Look, theoretically anything's possible, but they were like, this is a serious mission. And people have this skewed vision of what was Venezuela. Venezuela was a great operation militarily, but it was, the most impressive part of it was the intelligence services being able to then blackmail and or pay off the people on the ground to be able to come in and grab Maduro and pull him out. Securing nuclear enriched material is not going to be like that. It is in unbelievable facilities. We know these facilities due to Mr. Grossi, the chief of the IAEA, of how deep these are, how complex these are. It's a hell of a mission. And you're wanting to secure the Strait of Hormuz with paratroopers. Okay, well, where can they actually land here? You've got to have big, slow transporters dropping these guys in. You're going to have that many bloody guys too in the mountains there. And anyone who's been in Afghan knows what it's like in the mountains against local forces. This is a big operation. This is not dropping in a couple of plane loads worth of dudes. This is a serious war once there's boots on the ground. And not only that, military side of the huge commitment it would be. This isn't a small commitment in and out. I think you would likely see protests in the street against this in America. I think in America, the support of this war, in my opinion, is significantly lower than the polls are showing. The polls I see, I know Trump, he quotes 80%, 90% of people in MAGA who are still part of MAGA, I guess, support the war, whatever. And then you see other polls that suggest 20%, 27%. From what I've seen, trying to sit back and observe the left and right, I'd put this at 5% of people that I see actually support this war in its current state. And if it were to go boots on the ground, guys being killed, wounded, it would plummet to 1%. You just have Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Donald Trump all in a triangle hand shandy off, and it would plummet. And you're not going to have, I believe America's had 6 or 7 soldiers sadly killed in this war. You're going to have significantly more than that. If you step into the compounds trying to secure these areas in an existential crisis for the Iranians, I'm not saying the Americans are not significantly better soldiers and equipped. Well, we have lost wars against people with no air power, and in some cases not even boots, because it is their terrain. It is existential for them. It's not existential for us. It would be a bloody nightmare.
Yeah. And look, I mean, just on the map, Iran is 3 times the size of Iraq with 4 times the population and mountains, more than Afghanistan. It's double the size of Afghanistan more. And Afghanistan is as big as Texas. And Texas is big as crap, dude. It's huge. So I've never been to Afghanistan, but I've been to Texas. And it's, from the center of Texas to El Paso is halfway to the Pacific Ocean. Right? It's huge. So 2.5 of those is the size of Iran. No foreign army sacking the Persian landmass, dude. It just ain't gonna happen. And there's no organized force on the ground. There's no group of bin Ladenites or Kurdish communists or anybody else who can do it. Mujahideen, Khalq, or anyone else. There's no one to use to take power. They want to parachute the monarchists in there. I encourage that. I would like to see them silent on Twitter because they got parachuted into Iran and then were never heard from again.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would be funny with the monarch on. I'm ready to go in. I'm ready to this. Well, okay, I'm sure with air dominance over Tehran, we can drop you in. See how that goes.
I saw in the Jerusalem Post, the Shah Reza Pahlavi issues his final call to the people to rise up and prepare for his return. It's just like, ha ha ha, you gotta be kidding, dude. I'm actually laughing out loud in my room alone reading the Jerusalem Post. These people are nuts.
Yeah.
Scott,
mate, thank you for the wonderful chat this morning. Is there any final points before I let you go?
Yeah, man. Everyone go to thefactsaboutiran.com. Thefactsaboutiran.com. And, I know everybody is upset about this. Nobody believes the hype, but they're not sure what to believe. So here's the background on America's relationship with Iran, all for free for you there at thefactsaboutiran.com.
Perfect. And of course, you have some wonderful books. Normally, your bookshelf is completely full
I'm
behind
moving.
you. You're moving. Okay. I was going to say, it looks a little bit bare in there, mate.
I know it.
But, mate, Scott, look, you look after yourself. You have a fantastic day. My audience, I'm sure, will come across. They're fans of you. It'll be interesting to see I'm sure the comments will be very civil on this video. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.